UNLV Microcertificate Economics. What's in between? Well, strangely enough, the first thing that's in between monopoly and perfect competition is monopolistic competition. That's a pretty good and descriptive name. Interestingly enough, there are more businesses in the world that are monopolistic competition than anything else, and yet economists, we probably spend less time talking about it in our classes because it's just not as much fun. So we have many small firms, just like perfect competition. We have free entry and exit, just like perfect competition. But we have differentiated products. So think about restaurants. Small businesses, lots of them, easy to start and stop. Each one of them is unique. Plumbing companies, hairdressers, your nail salon, your books, right? Many small firms, differentiated products. Okay? So they're gonna compete on price and quality and marketing. They have very interesting and complex ways they're gonna compete. At the same time, in some ways, they're not competing. So it's interesting, but again, we don't spend that much time on it, strangely enough. Nobody controls this market. It's a market where each firm is fighting for their life all the time. Generally speaking, firms in monopolistic competition ignore each other. A sandwich shop on the east side of Vegas does not have to worry about what the sandwich shops on the west side of Vegas are. If you're a little mom and pop sandwich shop and Subway's coming in down the street, you might care. But generally speaking, you really don't interact with the other businesses around you. You're dealing with your customers, and that's what you're worried about. These guys can't collude. They can't work together. We're going to see that when there's more than one, what you want to do is work together, but they can't, right? There's really no way to get all of the sandwich shops in Vegas together and agree on like what the price of pepperoni should be. Each firm has some control over their price, so each one of these little businesses, they can set their own price. They're obviously not going to be able to set it too high relative to their competition. So air conditioning people don't all charge exactly the same exorbitant price, but they all charge a pretty exorbitant price relative to, They will compete with each other on price. Taco Bell pushes the fact that they've got these value menus, and Wendy's has their value menu, and they're competing for your business on the basis of price. But they also use what we call non-price competition. So Taco Bell's got all their cool, stuff that comes out for a short time, and they've got 47 ingredients, and Del Taco's telling you how everything's made fresh in their store, and Chipotle's like, our food is organic. So everybody's got their way of trying to attract you. What do they do differently, right? And it's not just about price. The advantage in non-price competition is that competition creates innovation. One of my favorite COVID stories is this one. Picture it right under the word innovation. The businesses were told they had to keep initially, right? We didn't wear masks. You can't really eat and wear a mask anyhow, but they were told they had to keep people 6 feet apart. So this owner went out and he put wheels on his tables and got giant inner tubes and and everybody's rolling around in their giant inner tube and they're all 6 feet apart. Okay? Innovation. That happens because there's competition. Now, like I said, we don't spend that much time on that because, probably more marketing class stuff than economics class stuff, which is probably why. But anyway, we spend a lot of time talking about oligopoly, though. Oli means a few. So an oligopoly is when we have a few sellers, a few firms. Now, how do we know what a few is? Well, it's simple. If what one of them does affects the others, it's an oligopoly. If United Airlines starts offering $50 round trips to LA from Vegas, that's going to affect Southwest and Delta and the other airlines that fly between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. They affect each other. That's how we know it's an oligopoly. So there might be 2, there might be 20, but they affect each other. They have not complete barriers to entry, but strong barriers to entry. It's really hard to start an airline. You have to have lots of money. You have to figure out some way to get your hold on gates. A lot of new airlines start up by flying into not the main airports because they can get a gate and a landing slot at a not main airport. So Allegiant flies into Colorado Springs and not into Denver, and they go, oh, that's our unique. But they probably can't get gates and landing slots in Denver, but they could get them in Colorado Springs. Okay, so oligopolies have ways of keeping competition out. There's a couple ways to measure it, how bad an oligopoly is, and the simplest way is what we call the concentration ratio. So we take the top 4 firms or the top 10 firms, and we add up what share of the market they had. For example, in Las Vegas, at its worst, 4 companies controlled about 90% of all of the hotel rooms on the Strip. Okay? And fewer companies than that controlled 90% of the casino space off the Strip. So we're very strongly concentrated, and we're fortunately now getting a little less concentrated over time, which is making us economists happy. So oligopoly, things like cereal or oligopolies, the trick again is that they affect each other, and we have an economics word for that, which is interdependence. They're interdependent. If General Mills puts boxes of Cheerios out there for $1 a box, that's going to affect Post and Quaker and the other cereal companies, and they're going to have to respond to it. Right? They're going to have to respond to it. This is going to make oligopoly more like a chess game where your opponent moves their knight and you have to respond. They're going to attack your queen. You have to respond. The easiest way for them to respond is what we call collusion again. We want them not to collude, but they want to collude. They want to work together. And if you go into any grocery store in town, you'll see that the cereal is pretty much laid out the same way in all the grocery stores. And that's because the cereal companies help stock the shelves, and they have an agreement with each other, which isn't written down anywhere. Okay? Coke and Pepsi have an agreement with each other, and they never actually put their own product on sale, right? They never talk about price in the ads. It's always about which tastes better, which one's cooler, right? It's a agreement. It's what we would call a tacit agreement, T-A-C-I-T, tacit, which means it's not written down, but it is an agreement. So how does this play out? Well, we have a theory called game theory. It started with this guy, John von Neumann. He invented the first computer and first electronic computer. And the government came to him and said, in World War II, and said, help us fight the war. And he realized that his favorite pastime, playing poker, was something like fighting the war, and then the government was actually literally going to pay him to study how to win at poker. And what he did was he was able to prove mathematically that you have to bluff sometimes. If you go and play poker and you never bluff, that is, never bet high on a bad hand, your opponents know that your bets are correlated to your hand, and they will take you to the cleaners. The more you bluff, the better you are at bluffing, the better you will do playing poker. Okay? So we play games, and we have economic games. These games have rules and strategies and payoffs and outcomes, just like the board game does. It has rules, it has strategy, there are payoffs, and there are outcomes. Right? It's true in Monopoly, it's true in chess and checkers, and you name it, yeah. Okay? Now the simplest example of this is what we call the prisoner's dilemma. So let's suppose the police know that the Riddler and the Joker killed somebody but they don't have any evidence. They know they did it, but there's no evidence. So they bring them both into jail, and you've seen this a million times on TV. They don't put them in the room together. They put them in separate rooms. They let each one of them know that the other one is there, and they put them into separate rooms. Now, if the two of them keep quiet, they both go free because the police don't have any evidence. But they're in with the Riddler going, hey, your buddy's turning on you, you better confess, or he's going to go free and you're going to go away. And they're in with the Joker going, hey, your buddy's going to confess, Okay? Now, you're the Joker, the Riddler, you're thinking, hey, if I confess and Joker doesn't, I'll tell him the Joker did it. I'll get off, he'll get lots of jail time. And the Joker's thinking, if I'll just confess, I'll make him a deal, I'll get off. The Riddler will get, well, what's going to happen? Yeah, they're both going to end up confessing and they're both going to go to jail. Okay? We call this a dominant solution. It's not the best solution. Understand, there's a difference between having the best solution and the dominant solution. The dominant solution is the one that's most likely to happen. And in the prisoner's dilemma, the worst thing is the one that's most likely to happen. They're both going to confess. They're both going to go to jail. That's what you see all the time on these cop shows, and it's not because it doesn't actually work that way. But you have to be smart. If you put them in the room together, they're both going to keep quiet and they're both going to go free. You have to separate them. Why? If they're in the room together, they're going to collude. If you separate them, they can't collude. They can't work together. Okay? Now, the next guy in line, and you may have seen the movie Beautiful Mind, which is a really bad, it's a good movie, but the story is really bad. It's not anywhere close to his actual story, but that's okay. So John Nash proved us lots of things. He proved us something called Nash equilibrium. And Nash equilibrium, unlike an Adam Smith equilibrium, Nash equilibrium, it just means you can be in a position where no one can improve their position. So if you're at a spot where the two of you are where you are, and neither one of you can make yourself better off than where you are, that's a Nash equilibrium. Well, it turns out that can be bad for everybody. Hey, the dominant solution is a Nash equilibrium. It's bad for both sides, but there's no way for them to get out of it. Okay? So what Nash is telling us, especially in oligopoly, is that there's no reason to believe that the equilibrium position is a good position. It could be a bad position. And again, the only way around it is to do what? Collude, right? We collude. So we look at Las Vegas in 2005. There was room on the Strip for one more big hotel. And everybody knew it. Yeah, and we're going to get a prisoner's dilemma. What's going to happen? Whoever builds it is going to win. So 6 companies all try to build it. Everybody knew if you didn't build it then, it was going to be a long time before you could build, maybe 20 years before you could build again, which turned out to be 16 years maybe. And even now, those new properties aren't making as much money as they might if they'd waited a little longer. But okay, 6 companies started to build it. Who won? Well, Wynn Resorts won. Steve Wynn won. He was the smartest. He started first, what we call a first mover advantage. He started first, finished first, and he had by far the best financing. We saw Boyd Group start and only get partway built, and that's now where Resorts World was, so nothing got built there for 16 years. Caesars built City Center, and partway through that project they had to shrink it. Or MGM built City Center, and partway through they had to shrink it, and then they had to sell Treasure Island to make their payments because they were in trouble. Caesars built towers along Flamingo that they waited years and years before they actually finished on the inside. They built the outside of the tower, but they didn't finish off the inside because... You with me? So every one of these other companies had a problem. 2 of them went bankrupt. Some of the projects never got done. 2 of the projects, and Wynn comes out, Encore, smelling like a rose. Okay? Game theory. It's all the prisoner's dilemma. Explains exactly what happened in Las Vegas during that time. Okay? So again, we had this first mover advantage. So there's all of these things. Being assertive, being the one who sets the pace, that makes a difference usually. So again, the solution to game theory is collusion. Work together. And the best thing that these oligopolies can do is non-price competition. So you're going to see these oligopolies figure out ways to not compete on their price if they can. So General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, when they were the U.S. auto industry, the three of them, they didn't really compete on price. When the Japanese come in force, it's hard to collude with them. And so now price becomes a bigger deal in the car business because we have non-price competition. What does game theory tell us about football teams cheating, the New England Cheaters? How many times did they get caught cheating? And did they lose any Super Bowls because of it? No. Did anything get taken away because of it? No. Did they? Yeah. So the system in a lot of sports, steroids in baseball, cheating there in football, stealing signs in baseball, the Houston Astros stealing signs and winning a World Series. Game theory tells us that they're going to cheat, that people are going to cheat. And as soon as people start cheating, if there's no real penalty, other people's going to start cheating too. Okay? So game theory explains just a ton of stuff that we have to deal with. Good? Good.